And welcome back to This is Dundermoose. I am your host. This is Dundermoose, and I'm really excited to bring you today. I have got another one for you, lady and gentlemen. I have another Battle Braunstein. This one run by Brian Renninger, aka Fluid the Druid, aka Slippery Pete, and various other frustrating characters in the
And
Trilopulus game.
Petrov the Prestidigitator.
Petrov, the short-lived but quickly to be revived prestidigitator. So welcome to the show. Let's get right into it. Brian, why gangbusters? Yeah, Shane.
Well, I got GangBusters when it was released back in 81, 82. I forget what year it was, around then. And I was a young man and I had no idea how to play it. And I think we rolled up some characters, we did some example fist fights. We never played a game. And the more I read it, the less idea I had how to play it,
So it
because
was confusing.
it was confusing and there wasn't a lot of guidance in the rules. And part of that is because each of the character classes is at odds with one another. They have different goals and objectives. They have different ways of gaining experience. And my only experience at that time was playing D&D with a party-driven approach where people are cooperating with one another.
Cooperative gaming. Yeah.
And so it just flabbergasted me for a long time, literally 40 years. And but in recent years, we've been experimenting with Braunsteins, and even as early as like 5 years ago, I still struggle with conceiving how to run it.
But it was still on your mind.
It was still on my mind. And but once we started experimenting with Braunsteins, it became obvious in some ways. At least obvious that it can be done, at least. And I'd asked other people like Mark Hunt, who's a big GangBusters promoter, has made his own BX version of GangBusters. But even talking with him, he didn't give a lot of advice on how to run it. When I asked him specifically, he would kind of say, well, you just sit down and do it. And, that wasn't helpful. So people failed to be able to communicate how to do it. And when you look at the products released for it, the modules, they don't help much either.
Would you say the modules are more along that D&D get along gang model?
Yes, it's sort of party based. It's sort of like if the players are playing, they're all playing law enforcement or all playing gangsters, or at least people allied with each other. And
So the
so
DM has to run all the other factions.
Mhm.
That sounds like it would eat a DM.
Or just pretend that not run them and just pretend they're out there, some hand wave it. Or create railroad modules with set plot points, like Call of Cthulhu often does. And so, but after experimenting with the Braunsteins, it became clear that you can just sit players down, each with their own class, and have them go at each other in their own way.
So
Follow their
Scouter
own
for Mike in
agendas.
the chat says YouTube could transform this hurdle. We can make videos of how to. We need to use our tools. So hopefully we get into a little bit of that today. So you were in the first. Did you play in the first Battle Braunstein? When was your first Braunstein?
I guess it was in the July 2021 Trilopoulos, but I
Okay,
wasn't.
the original.
I wasn't one of the factions though. I insisted on having Fluid, my character Fluid, as an individual PC, start doing stuff in it. And part of that was because I felt like you have factions, you also have players. They should be able to interact and do things together.
And what level was Fluid at this point?
Third.
because at third level, Fluid caused a lot of trouble
Mm-hmm.
with the sword and all that kind of stuff. So, at what point did you realize that you wanted to run Gangbusters in this fashion?
Well, soon after that, and I still didn't do it. I've been thinking about it for years, but really, since we've been doing a lot of Braunsteins in the last year, it really kicked it into high gear. And I was like, if I'm doing a Braunstein, I'm doing Gangbusters. And it became clear to me the more I looked at it that it was designed from the ground up to be a Braunstein, for these characters to be butting heads, not to be in cooperation.
So, Braunstein was the key that unlocked the whole game for you.
For sure. Yep.
All right. So now I'm going to kick it to the rest of our panel. Go around the room, introduce who you are, what role you were playing in this one, and also what made you willing to give this. I mean, there's a lot of BattleBraunsteins going on right now. What was it about this one that you were like, I got to get in on that? We'll start with Gabe because you are right to my right on the screen.
Okay. So the reason I jumped into this Braunstein is because Brian is always super nice to me on Twitter, and I just wanted to be like a stand-up guy and join his game. That's it. Like, I had never heard anything about Gangbusters or anything. So,
Did you know about Braunsteins?
yes, yeah. It was after Moonstein.
Okay.
So, and I think I had run one, maybe a week or two after Moonstein, my own sort of Western themed one.
Right on. I really didn't give Fluid much of a chance to appreciate Moonstein.
Uh-huh.
But I blame Jeffro for that because he wouldn't just let me rob everyone.
Yeah.
Okay, and which character did you play in this one?
I was Elliot Ness, the FBI. And again, I had no idea that Elliot Ness was a real person. I thought it was just an assigned name. And I didn't bother to like look this up to see anything about it. So I went in just as like, nothing. Oh, I'm just a random FBI agent.
You were like, I want to hang with Fluid.
Yeah. That's it.
All right. Fair. Well, and so did you have any goals heading in, or like was that up to you to make them up?
So one of the things that I thought worked really well and that could have gone horribly wrong but didn't was there were some pretty clear motivations and goals given to at least to my character, which was find out where this missing girl has gone. And like that's very actionable. Like I can do that. Sort of right out the gate. So I didn't have to sort of figure out what I was trying to do, other than, what specific steps I should take to do it.
Right on. Okay, next on my screen is Dornell. Same question. Number one, who were you playing? What were your initial goals? And why did you say yes to this one?
Well, I've been gaming with Fluid for a couple of years now. I joined the infamous Trollopulus crew in 2022. And Fluid and I have been talking about Gangbusters on and off for as long as I've known him, partially because I was interested in doing a similar game in a Cyberpunk or a Shadowrun game. That's sort of how the conversation started. I always imagined what would it be like if I ran a Shadowrun game, except everybody playing the game, and this is in conventional game style. What if everybody in the game was part of a gang?
All right.
Like you guys, we're not playing cool, slick net runners, and so you guys are a bunch of orc skinheads, and see what happens, right? And so anyway, I was very interested in trying out Gangbusters. Brian was really excited about it, so when he finally put this together, I jumped on it. In Gangbusters, I got to play some criminals. I played Leo O'Banion, the leader of the Irish mob, and he was in control of the Longshoresmen Union, and he pretty much had a stranglehold on the area's bootlegging trade.
Right on.
So I'm starting to get that I had a lot more resources than everybody else. I had several businesses that I had to protect. With
Mo money,
interesting,
mo problems.
I had mo money and mo problems. So uh, the interesting thing about this character is that the faction was defensive from the beginning. Uh,
Hmm.
my character is one of the characters with the most to lose. Um, I've got the mayor on my payroll. I've got the chief of police, who is actually played by one of the other players
Yeah.
on my payroll.
Yeah, hoid and heah, foist, people.
Night Danger, who by vote of everybody in the game won this game. Yeah, he was actually on my payroll, and so I had one natural allied character that I could work with. But it was an interesting scenario for me because I was the guy with stuff to lose because all the other criminal factions were after pieces of my business, and all the law enforcement factions would have been happy to shut down any of my businesses, uh, which was interesting.
How did you feel
So
starting off? Like, did you know how behind the 8 ball you were starting off? Like, were you like, it's gonna be everybody but me? Everyone against me? Was that a
I
vulnerable?
yes, and uh, I felt very vulnerable despite the apparent resources that I had, uh, because Fluid didn't tell me much about my enemies. I I knew that there were going to be certain factions in the game who were probably going to be coming after me or my businesses or anything like that, but the only information I had was a little bit about Johnny Casper playing the Italians and that mob, and uh, I didn't know at the start of the game that they actually controlled the Teamsters Union, and they were my main rivals. So that was
Okay.
really that was really interesting. So yeah, Fluid gave us this information packet with what you know and what you know about yourself and what you know about some of the other people. And curiously absent from that was who's coming after me. All I know is that I've got a bunch of businesses and there's a city council vote coming up in the next couple of weeks.
That's right.
And if that goes poorly, I'm going to lose my access to the bootlegging operations on the docks. So this is a sink or swim sort of moment for the character.
So that was an event you were very much looking towards, saying, "I gotta make sure this goes right." Um, Johnny Caspar couldn't be with us tonight, but Hugh Fos is the one who played him and popped in the chat earlier tonight and said, "Since I can't make it, I wish it to be known that Johnny Caspar is the toughest dude in town. No hi hat. Anyone who says otherwise gets the beats."
That's right. That he is tough because well, I tried to kill him and it didn't work.
Did not work. All right, we'll get to that in just a bit. Next up, next up is Fluid going clockwise, but let's jump over him for a minute and hear from Trash. Trash, who were you playing? Oh, I'm sorry, Trash, aka Thrash. I've heard him called that as well. I don't know why. Who were you playing? What was your goal? And why did you give this GangBusters Braunstein a shot?
Okay, I played Gemini Collins, aka Anti-Gem, the unofficial at first and then later official leader of the Fire Kings gang, the Black Gang,
Yes.
sort of the underdog, kind of on the periphery with not a ton of resources outside of their own neighborhood. My goal with the gang was really just to survive. I intentionally chose the underdog. I didn't know much about it at the onset. I just like looking at the options. I I thought that either the gang that didn't have that many resources and was kind of like on the upper, trying to claw their way into prominence, or the cops sounded like a fun time because both of those were kind of under the gun, and I figured that might be a good way to get just start directly into like a Braunstein, because this is, I think, my first actual real like Braunstein, section Braunstein, battle Braunstein, whatever you want to call it. So I've participated in the more like by post stuff, but I hadn't participated in a real full like single section. So I figured I'd just jump right in with a difficult one that would force me to kind of try to play all sides simultaneously, which was a lot of fun. It was really difficult. And my plans did not ultimately come to fruition because there was a singular event that did not happen that I was kind of hoping would happen, which was the clan rally.
Oh, the clan rally, yeah.
But
So
we don't shy away from that stuff here in Braunsteins.
that's right. Well, that's the thing about this game, is it is an accurate representation of the tensions that were going on at, what is it, Lakeside City?
Lakefront
Yeah.
City.
Lakefront City. 1920s people. It was the game is, I'm sure nowadays, like if WotC re-released it, there'd be like a huge sensitivity reader blurb in the front saying as how they don't agree with something or other, but they're still happy to take your $100 for it. But anyway, I felt like that was an interesting, I mean, not all of us were playing our own race, not all of us were playing our own gender. My character was a female. I think yours too was too as well, Trash, right?
yeah, Auntie Jem was a woman.
Auntie Jem. So yeah. So let's I want to jump back to Dornell because he had something he was going to share with us. We started to talk a little bit about the preparation that that Fluid gave us. So maybe Dornell, you've got control of the screen, but if Fluid, if you want to talk us through what was the upfront stuff, like how much of this did you create versus how much came with the game, and how did you know how you wanted to set up to run this BattleBraunstein? Because I felt like this one had a lot of information right out of the gate.
Okay, well, first, as a caveat, it should be obvious to anybody who's seen the movie A Miller's Crossing that Leo Banyan and Johnny Casper and their gangs are straight out of that movie.
Okay.
Including most of the characters who are working for him. Not all of them. I invented Johnny Casper's daughter. But as far as this, I put the mob bosses' stats right up front. I gave a little picture to give an idea who they were, if I had a picture. Of course, that's the actor who played Leo Banyan in the movie.
Dornell, had you seen this movie? Did you know like the vibe he was going for, or did you have no idea?
I had no idea.
I recommend it. It's one for the list. It's in the top 5 mobster movies ever made.
Miller's Crossing?
Yeah, it's Coen Brothers.
Okay.
And so it's awesomely written and directed. Wonderful.
They do great films.
So do you think that would have made him play his character better to have seen that, or do you think it doesn't really impact much? Or would you have preferred that they didn't?
I think either way would have been fine. I think if you had watched the movie, then you had kind of seen some of the things that were going on in the initial setup. You would have understood them a little bit more. But it wasn't necessary. I just picked them because I wanted to. I thought it was funny.
Right on. Because if this was Jeffro, he'd be like, before you can play, your homework is to watch this movie. Right?
Right.
And then give me a book report.
So, but if you scroll down, I just then put in notes about stuff they knew. Now, I probably should have said more about Casper. But because he would have known it. But there's some stuff in there.
Yeah, really interesting stuff for me. Was I mean, obviously I've got mechanical abilities. I can get trucks or gangsters in an emergency. Tells me that I've got some actual locations and businesses. The city council. This was my big goal in terms of what my character is working towards.
Mm-hmm.
There's some personal stuff too, and you'll have to. I'd love to hear more about that because you obviously tried to sprinkle in some personal issues that would instead of just business or just game mechanics or something like that.
Yeah, the planned wedding with Verna is straight out of the movie.
Mhm.
Same with her brother Bernie and his friend Mink, who works for Casper.
Mhm.
Mink. Okay, that's where Mink came from.
And Tony Lombardo, though, is a real guy. He was Al Capone's Castigliere. I don't know how to pronounce the word.
Consigliere.
Yes, and this was not long before he would have been. I forget. He was either killed or arrested. I forget which one now. But in the game, he was coming into Lakefront City from Chicago to try to wrangle, take over the town essentially.
Yeah, so
for
the
Al
town was
Capone.
lousy with gangsters already, and then we had Mr. Capone was like adding some pressure on that, coming into town, sending his people in to say, "All right, you guys are going to be working for me," right?
Right.
And worth noting that I basically ignored this point because Tony Lombardo wasn't one of the players. Well, Tony Lombardo was actually one of the players who was playing in absentia by email or
Right.
by Discord post. It was Macho Mandolf actually
Yes.
playing Al Capone's faction.
And I don't know how you guys feel, but like whenever I'm in one of these and I hear that Macho has entered the chat, I get a little bit of a pit in my stomach.
And he did actually during the session send me a few notes of things to do and
Right on.
actions to take. So I was kind of going with what he told me to do.
Macho won't just attack you with 2 adult blue dragons. He will attack you over the tree line with 2 adult blue dragons, one of which has cast mirror image on itself. Alrighty.
And then if you scroll down again, you can see I kind of outlined named characters. Most of these are from the movie. And maybe all of them even, except for the hitmen. Though their actual roles may be somewhat different than in the movies. It was just kind of a guideline.
So you put a lot into this up front. I wonder how many other tools you were using in the background to keep track of who was where. Because I mean, that's the thing about these Braunsteins is like the players get away from you. Like you just let the dogs off the leash.
Absolutely get away from you.
Were you expecting that, or was it still a surprise?
I was expecting it, but I did struggle with keeping track of what was happening which day and who had given me an order for what and when. And part of that was just because we were doing it through Discord, having to go through each of the communication channels where we're still communicating, and so the orders are upstream from there. So trying to scroll back and find the thing that you're now talking about over and over, it was a little awkward, to be honest.
Yeah, let me interject in here and say I think a lot of the problems would have been of communication and sort of keeping track of everybody would have been solved if we just did it openly. I think that was a major issue in terms of like you having to process every order yourself rather than having just all of the orders set and then open for everybody to see as you resolve them, and the orders,
what do you mean by that, Gabe? Like, are you saying like we would submit written orders and then he would read them all out loud? Or are you saying that we'd all be in one room telling him what we wanted to happen?
No, I think the written orders for the week, but then they are resolved in public. They aren't resolved secretly, and then people can have their side chats if they want. But
that might actually be even more consistent with the limited description that they have on how to do it that's in the rules.
Right.
The example they have is everyone's sitting at the table, and the GM gets the orders, and they just start working through them as a group. And I think that's worth a try. In fact, I think that's
but
well
what
worth
does
a
that do
try.
to the fog of war?
Yeah, it lessens it, obviously.
Well, sort
Yeah.
of, because you have your set orders. Like you can't. So you gave us some chances to revise orders,
Mhm.
Yeah,
and make
on a day-to-day
positive
basis.
new orders. I think if you did one where you resolved all the orders in the open after a period of secret discussions, and then everybody writing down their week's worth of orders, resolved those in the open, and then allowed people to cancel orders based on what happens any given day, but without allowing them to add positive new orders. I think
Oh, I see.
you would just burn through a week of orders very quickly. Like I think we would have gone
Yeah.
through at least 2 weeks worth of gameplay doing it that way, which is not
there might be something to that. I would agree.
Yeah.
I also think literally if all the orders were out front, you wrote them down out front, had everybody looking at them, then the players themselves could be looking for the confluences as opposed to just the referee.
Right.
Be
I
like,
want to ask about that.
we're coming into conflict here at this spot. This is the one, right? Is possible.
Because as a player, especially in some of these games where there's fog of war, sometimes you issue orders thinking that you understand what's going on, and then the game master has to kind of put it all together for a confluence, and they realize something interesting can happen, but it doesn't necessarily go the way that everybody's input thought it went. But like it's enough of a suggestion that you're like, okay, here's what happened when you tried to do that.
Let's see. We haven't gone through everyone yet.
We haven't talked about me.
That's right.
And so for me, then this is relevant to what we're talking about right now, because for me, I was kind of like the channel for the open broadcast of what was going on. However, I was the newspaper. I was the Times Crier. And if we'd had everyone, there would be 2 newspapers, and we would be trying to scoop each other. So there'd be that pressure for that, right?
Right.
But by having me be the one to announce what actually happened, what you had is you gave everyone else the chance to deceive the whole table by either just being tight-lipped with me, as Mr. O'Banion was, did not give me crap to work with, and hurt your score. If I'd have known all the crap you were up to, I would have rated you higher, Dornell, and you might have won. But every time I talked to him, he was just very polite. He was mildly threatening, and just didn't say anything other than watch out for Mink. He's a bad guy. Right? I don't know if everything I reported was the truth or if I got hoodwinked. But my job was to try to find the stories and uncover them before any other papers could. I think that's all my goals were. I'm trying to remember. It's been a minute now, and there's a lot of stuff that's gone on since then. The other thing that I have to answer yet is why I was attracted to this game. I didn't know anything about GangBusters. I have seen Untouchables. I know who Elliot Ness is. But
why is that so funny? I just,
that's like saying I don't know who
He's
Paul
a
Bunyan
legend.
is. I've heard there's like Tall Tales. Like Elliot Ness is like, he's like the biggest celebrity of this era, I'd say. Elliot Ness is the one who took down Al Capone, got him on tax evasion. You need to watch the movie, dude. It's really good. Untouchables, very quotable. Did he sound anything like that? Anyway, all of that aside, first of all, I knew Fluid from playing with him in Trilopolis, and I really enjoy the way this man's mind moves. He comes up with stuff that cracks me up. He comes up with very interesting takes, nuanced understanding of the rules of AD&D First Edition, and so I knew this was going to be something special. And so, without knowing anything about the game itself, I was like, I'm down. What do I need to read? I'll try and learn on the fly. I feel like that's how I do all these ones that I take part in. Like I just learn just enough of the rules to get a fingertip on them. But yeah, and I don't know if anybody had as much fun in this one as I did. I didn't really move the needle as far as who got killed or where the power structure lie, but I was somebody that everybody wanted to talk to find something out, and I could negotiate with them to share my information if they gave me some. And so it was a blast. And then Fluid gave me the chance at the beginning of each week. I got to come on and do my little news story. I'd type
at
it
the
up.
beginning of each day. You had daily
Yes.
headlines.
Yeah, the daily headlines. Stop the presses. Here's what's going on. There's been a body found outside of a club. You know, there was a couple people that did not make it. They got killed. There was 2 missing teenagers, both children of rival gangs. There was a rumored KKK rally that was going to be marching right through the Black Quarter. And then when I talked to Trash about it, he seemed oddly unconcerned. He's like, "Oh yeah, they're not here for us. They're just going to be marching on through. They're going to what did you say? They were going for the church, right? The Catholic Church for some reason.
The cathedral, yeah, the cathedral downtown.
So a lot of this stuff was how much of these seeds did you like set up ahead of time, Fluid, and like know when they were going to happen, or maybe it was on like a random table? We had a dude that sat on top of a flagpole with like a table and like had a meal up there.
Well, some things were set up. Most things were set up ahead of time to some degree. The two missing persons was, and I knew where they were hiding out.
Mm-hmm.
And they were not under control of any player character.
That's right.
They're true NPCs, and that's one thing that I wanted to have, which was I wanted players, I wanted factions, and I wanted true NPCs where the players can't be absolutely certain that the people that they tell to do something actually go do it, or that there's other people doing things in the background. The stuff with Bertie Birnbaum and Mink and stuff, that's straight out of the movie.
Okay.
Out of Miller's Crossing. And so that was, I kind of had a little bit of a timeline for that. Let's see. What other things were there? The Union city council vote with the aldermen. That
Yeah.
I set a date for that on the calendar ahead of time. The flagpole sitter was from a random table I made years ago for GangBusters, where you'd roll on a random table, you'd find an event, and even how that event really turned out was, again, a second random encounter. And that was based on the format in Traveler Patrons book, where you roll, you find a patron, and then you roll to see the nature of that patron, because the patron book always gives 3 options, and there's kind of like a good, bad, and a neutral sort of scenario for each of the patrons.
Okay.
And so one of the things I wrote was the flagpole sitter guy, and the reason, and then the random thing was why he was up there, and you know.
So I felt like that one was one for me, right? Because you're like, oh, give the newspaper something. Like, it's obviously not going to impact the gang war, but like, it's an interest piece. But other factions got involved with it.
Yeah,
like,
and that was one that I rolled, but also the private detective faction, which also we didn't have a player for, but if we had a player for, could have done stuff with those things.
Turns out he was trying to get away from his wife.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, he was hiding that from his wife.
The chief of police actually made a really clever play with that, to take some obvious, just a for fun story about this guy sitting on a flagpole, and he went and sent the guy lunch and made sure the whole town knew that it was the policemen's union who kept the guy going.
Is
they used a ladder truck, a fire truck. with a ladder, and I was there taking pictures the whole time. You hoid it here, foist people.
It was
Yeah.
great because Gangbusters has this really cool mechanic that it's the first time I've seen a mechanic quite like it in games called the public opinion
Mhm.
result, which I don't know how often you're supposed to check it every day or every month or something like that.
Usually
Or
there's a number of instigating events that you would check it. Like if somebody got rubbed out and it was public, you'd roll to see, or if there was something exciting happened, you'd roll
so
and see
when
what
big
people
news
think about it.
hits, you check the public opinion and see how it affects their
Right.
too
Well,
much gangland violence and public opinion tanks and
Yeah, and then
so
the
on.
chief of police may be, even though he's on the take, may feel compelled to have to do something, right?
Yeah, maybe that's the answer to what a reporter character is supposed to pay attention to when they're not, uh, going against a rival newspaper, is
yeah.
to just wield public opinion like
Yeah.
a weapon.
I hadn't even
Yes.
thought of
Like
that.
that's essentially their clout that they can
if-
sort of swing around.
Yeah, and in fact, in the rules, it's the newspapers and the churches which can have the biggest effect on public opinion. There isn't any church character class, so that's just run by the referee. But there are newspaper reporter character classes, and so that is part of the swinging public opinion. The newspaper news reporter character is directly in line to do that.
And
And
there
those
was
the
go ahead.
fact that someone's playing the newspaper makes that an amazing dynamic. Just to draw out what you guys were saying, let's say, for example, I was about to enter a very hot gang war with Johnny Caspar and Al Capone's thugs, and at the time of the game's end, I had actually gotten the Fire Kings gang. I was trying to get them on my side so that we could work together. And if you're playing with a referee, you've got to make sure, hey, ref, I want to do this, I want to do that. I want to try to get the newspapers to sort of keep this big stuff, keep the bodies out of the newspaper and, try to fluff up my side. It's a completely different ballgame when it's another player that you have to do that with, that you have to negotiate with. What an amazing dynamic the law and order and the criminals and public opinion. It made for such a cool dynamic. And I don't even think we finished an entire week. I think we got 6 days in.
We got
worth
4
of game.
days.
4 days.
Well,
Yeah.
and to your point about that, Dornell, if the GM were running the newspaper and you're like, hey, I want to keep this out of the papers, and the GM says, nope, they're going to bust the story, you might be like, oh, come on, why couldn't you just let me have that? Right? Yeah. But when it's another player that you have to use your social game to manipulate, you can't be mad when they do something out of their own self-interest. It's not the GM just noping you at that point. It's like, no, you didn't convince them. Right?
Yeah.
Right.
And you might decide about that reporter.
I'm sorry, say that again. I talked over you. I apologize.
Oh, I was to say you and the gangster might just decide to rub out that reporter.
Yeah.
Right? It's a fine line. It's like,
you know what, this isn't going well. We gave it a shot. It's not going to work out for you.
We're going another way.
We got some shoes for you.
But give me a second. I wanted to communicate some of my overarching goals of the game.
Yes.
When I started, which was one of the things was I have the box set from the 80s with the crayon and the dice, the 2 maps, and there's the city map, and on the back there's a detailed railway map of the downtown area. But one of the things I wanted to use was as much of the stuff that was in the box as possible. So I was like, I want to use these maps to the extent I can. I want to use the information on it. And on that map, we talked about the ethnicities. This map shows every neighborhood and the ethnicities in the neighborhoods. It shows their political breakdown of each of the districts and the overlapping of each of the districts as far as Republican, Democrat, and Socialist. And I wanted to use all that information, and to a certain extent I did, because I had the vote coming up. So people could, nobody did, but people could have gone and interacted with the aldermen as NPCs and tried to influence them. And I gave the gangsters who were involved and the police that were involved a lot of information on those aldermen. It may have been too much information. I'm sure it made people's eyes blur over. But if we had gone longer, that vote might have come up and it become more important. So I wanted to use as much as I could, and that meant using the campaign rules, which are written weekly orders and public opinion, like we discussed before. I wanted to use as many classes as possible, and we got all of them except for PI in. Let's see. I wanted to use factions as in Trollhoppers 2021, and I think those are all my biggest goals to get all the subsystems of the game to a certain extent in order. Now, we didn't use every combat rule. We had one combat. We never had a card chase. But that combat that we did have used the firearms rules. It used the fist fighting rules, and they interacted in a very nice way, in my opinion.
Yeah, I got the map up now, a zoomed in version of it, so you can see across the top and the sides. You see the which colors, where's the working class Irish, where the middle class assimilated.
Those basically show the territories of the gangs too, in essence.
Mm-hmm.
And what else? Oh, it also shows the city boundary. That dotted line is the city line. And I explicitly put some things across the city line to make things more difficult. Certain characters' houses, like I think some of the mob bosses' houses, the Fire Kings were outside the city limits.
Yeah,
and so
you put O'Banion's house outside city limits. I noticed that. I was that's powerful.
Yeah,
that didn't stop the feds from coming down at me. I think it was on square 18.
Yeah, the feds have different authorities. But it did kind of complicate the feds interacting with the local police. They really should have brought in the sheriff to do what they did in the game, and that could have come back later to haunt them, perhaps, if somebody sued them.
You think about that while I beat the rap.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so there was a big violent event that did sway public opinion and got people hot and bothered. Trash, your husband was found swinging from a tree.
Yeah, I had that was definitely in no way an expected outcome.
Yeah, it was a surprise for everyone, I think. But I sold a lot of papers that day, I'll tell you that.
And that was a random roll. Because I was like, okay, he sent him to look for the son and to go talk with the
his son,
clan.
that faction's son. I don't think you explained this. That faction's son was one of the missing persons.
Yes.
Yeah, we had
the missing persons were Johnny Casper's daughter and the Fire King's son.
Yeah, it was Romeo and Juliet, basically, and going to shack up in a motel, and but the son ended up killing the father and pinning it on the clan.
Mm-hmm.
Oh wait, really? I didn't even I thought that was just the clan.
I figured that bit out, but here's the thing. One of my reporters spotted the girl in the hotel. And so this was like a point where for the whole Braunstein, I had just been reactive. I was just playing my role and having a blast. And I was like, wait a minute, this is a BattleBraunstein. You're supposed to do things to change the status quo. You're supposed to drive it, right? And so I went to a bunch of factions independently and just told them, hey, I haven't told anyone else this, but I know where Johnny Casper's daughter is, and I have a hunch that she may not be alone. And what I was hoping was that everybody would show up at the same time, and it would be this crazy fight, and I could cover the whole thing and just have the most sensational newspaper story ever. However, the mob bosses were just so into it with their own murderous plans. The only people that showed up were Elliot Ness and the local cops, right? Like, we didn't get the Prohibition cops. We just got
The local PD.
we got
I
the local
believe.
PD and the feds.
Yeah.
And one of them followed her in the front. She ran for it. The other one went around back and caught the son kind of trying to break out of the back window. And I got a just lurid picture of this man trying to escape out of the back of this girl's place. And immediately the cops were like, you cannot print this. If you want any access to the people afterwards, you got to keep a lid on this. And I did. So I think I'm the only one that put together that the son probably, because the son wanted to go out on his own and start his own gang. And I was the one that said, you know what, if I questioned him, I bet it would come out that he did kill his father because his father tried to put a stop to it. But I couldn't say anything because I didn't want to lose the chance to interview the custody, in custody suspects. So it was interesting.
And that event also led to the Klan canceling the rally. They were like, "Oh, it's too hot now."
Oh darn!
I'm still getting threats. Look at this. He posted, "I'm definitely going to visit the newspaper over those photos." And good man knows how flammable paper is. The threats continue.
Yeah, I did not care, and you characterized my interactions as me being tight-lipped, and so did the chief of police for that matter. But most of the reason for that, I had no information at all about the two lovers. I did not care one whit. The only thing I knew is that Caspar was part of a rival gang. And so my initial instinct was to, well, if I find out any information, maybe I'll help, in exchange for some goodwill from Johnny Caspar.
That's right.
I did not care at all about that subplot, which actually was great. A question for you, Fluid, because those were the interesting things to me. The fact that everybody had a really important subplot, and they didn't intersect with all the factions. How long did it take you to come up with those subplots? Because I'll tell you that was pretty satisfying. Like I'd probably put that in a PDF and sell it as a module.
Right on.
Well, the Romeo and Juliet came out of I think it was Jeffro and John Mollison and I, and there might have been someone else there. We had a little few months earlier little conference to talk about Braunsteins and do some brainstorming. And I think John Mollison actually thought up the Romeo and Juliet subplot. And so I came up with one and put it in. The other subplots that were Leo based with Mink and Bernie Birnbaum and Verna, which I hope people would grab onto, those are straight out of the movie, though I added Verna shopping for wedding dresses with the hopes that somebody might try to, kidnap her or something. Nobody did. And let's see. And with the KKK, I didn't create them as a separate faction, but I had them as a random element so that each day I would roll to see if they showed up. And so I think I gave them like 1 in 6 chance that they would show up on each day for their march, because they had announced that they were going to do a march, but they didn't say when. And so I just was rolling, and they didn't show up. But after the death of the father, I canceled that. I figured they would cancel their plan. Let's see, what other subplots were there?
So Trash, was there anything that you had going on that you feel like nobody knew about?
Oh, there's that. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say there is the Al Capone subplot. I layered that
Yeah.
on top of the Miller's Crossing essentially plot that there's another party to cause chaos. Okay, sorry, Trash.
Oh yeah, my whole plan with the clan rally was I figured since it was going to march all the way downtown to the cathedral, like historically they didn't like Catholics very much, and my rivals are all Catholic, so I thought that was kind of advantageous if I just sort of let them go through my neighborhoods without any problem. I was paying off like delinquent teenagers from multiple ethnic backgrounds to try to stir up chaos when they were like demonstrating outside the cathedral in the hopes of starting a race riot. And then I was going to use the race riot as a cover to hit both Casper and O'Banion's numbers brackets because I had all of the information like cased out on where they were doing that and who was involved. So I could have robbed their bagmen at any time, but I figured I would go a step further and use the riot as a cover to like completely destroy it, murder a bunch of their guys, burn it, like, you know, rob them blind, maybe kidnap some people for information or whatever. But because the rally never happened, it just didn't really come to fruition.
Yeah, and maybe if we had kept going, there would have been other opportunities to do the numbers racket raids.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
I pivoted to doing it to O'Banion, but then I canceled for the last second because he started being very friendly to me. But then the game was over. So.
yeah, we could have used another week for all that to develop because what happened with O'Banion and Casper is that remember how earlier I said that I didn't quite have enough information on my rivals? I didn't know that Casper was in charge of the Teamsters. I had no idea that he was actually my number one primary rival.
Okay.
In addition, and this is when we started talking because on day 3, Al Capone's guy Tom Lombardo made his offers to all the gangsters. Hey, you know, you work for Al Capone. You know, you keep your businesses. You just give us a cut, right? Well, rumor had it that not rumor. Tom Lombardo actually said out loud, "Hey, John and Casper already took us up on this deal." And in my mind, instantly, I realized that we were just about to split into 2 factions. And so that's when we spoke, and I was like, "Look, there's going to be a gang war, and Al Capone's trying to move in, and we should stick together." And I believe I made an offer of, you know, we can share business, like we can do profit sharing, that sort of thing, like
Tag says, "Is this
GTA
like
for old people?
Grand Theft Auto for old people?"
Yeah, man, Grand Theft
Yes.
Auto with Tommy guns and
Yes, it
and
is. Yes, it is.
I had
it
no
was-
idea any of that stuff was going on with you, Dorno.
yeah,
Did-
but you guys were so obsessed with the Romeo and Juliet story. I'm like, sorry, the only news I
So
have to
dramatic.
offer is trying to make the Teamsters Union look bad.
Yeah,
Dave, what
well,
did
part
you
of
think
part of the
about-
reason I think the Romeo and Juliet story took over is because that was what the feds were there for. But the FBI was not just there to find the girl because it was a missing persons case. We were there to find her in order to get Caspar to become our informant on Al Capone. So we wanted, so our whole thing was we wanted Caspar to join up with Al Capone, but then we wanted to have him friendly to the FBI as our way to get to Capone. And our path to that was finding his daughter.
You were going for bigger fish.
Yes. And it was kind of interesting because as the FBI, we will have to rely on the local police and everything, but we are not accountable to anybody in town. And we do not care what bridges we burn or what, you know, careful networks and balances of power. Like we're just stomping around, you know, with like elephants in the in the underbrush,
Yeah.
just looking for what we want. And it, like, one of the reasons the police character was so fun to work with is because it's very clear what he was trying to do was just always be a buffer between the FBI and the race riots or gang wars or whatever, that they don't care if they're starting as long as they get what they want. Because we just have we have a goal and then we're gone. We don't care if your city burns afterwards.
Well, he was. I mean, Dornell, you said
that
felt
was our
vulnerable.
first conversation. By the way, the first conversation I had with the chief of police was, "Hey, any information you have on Johnny Kaspar's daughter, we need to get this mystery solved right now so that we can get the FBI out of town." That's almost exactly what he said to me. And I was like, "Sure." And then I looked over at my sheet and I was like, "Can't help you."
So here's some background information for the general viewer, which is that at this time in the 1920s, the FBI has no authority to arrest anyone. They can only arrest people through local intermediaries. They can't even carry guns. Well, they can carry guns. They're not disallowed from carrying guns. They're not assigned to guns. They're not expected to carry
They
guns.
carry guns as private citizens. They don't carry guns as FBI agents.
Yeah,
exactly.
Interesting.
Which is gaming gold. Like, if you're setting up a Braunstein, just steal that mechanic for two different factions, where there is a local person who can make arrests, and then someone over them who has sort of total authority but can't actually make any arrests. It made the interactions between the police and the FBI just great fun to play.
Yeah, and the police officer was really in the vice as far as I just got to get these FBI guys out of here because I'm already beholden to one of the mob bosses, but I need to be seen doing enough of my job that they get what they want and go away. And he's constantly probably worried that by meeting one master he will betray the other. I think that's delicious. I think what a fun game he had.
But at any moment he could have told me to go pound sand if I needed him to do something, though.
Yeah.
I couldn't force his hand.
I would like to have seen that develop. You wanna handle this crime? Well, I've got some Italian mobsters that need to be arrested. So how about you start investigating over on this side of town, and then we'll talk.
Oh man.
You want someone arrested? I'll give you someone else that I need to get arrested.
Altered Game says, this sounds like a fun game. How many players do you normally feel comfortable with running something like this?
As many as possible.
Wow.
Yeah. To me, as the guy who ran it, in the way I ran it, I think I was at maximum number. Though we said there were a couple seats that weren't filled.
So we didn't have the Pinkertons and we didn't have the big paper. I was like the second class rag.
Yeah.
The big paper or the Pinkertons.
Yeah. I would have loved to have them nonetheless. But yeah, the way I had organized it to run it was, I was busy the whole time. I was just on. Now here, this leads to a question for the players. Earlier this week, I think it was this week or last week, Night Danger, who was one of my players in another stream, argued that the game was immersive. And of course, I was saying there's no such thing as immersion. That
was a fun little back and forth.
And he says, "But I was immersed. You can't deny."
You said you were engaged.
You were engaged. My theory is that there's no such thing as immersion. There's just stuff to do. You're busy. And one thing that was pleasing to me while running the game was that I could see, as I was doling out information and adjudicating orders behind the scenes, I could see players immediately then go and start chatting with each other in various chat rooms to talk about things. And one of my big fears was that while I was frantically scrolling up and down trying to understand what people's orders currently were, that a lot of people were twiddling their thumbs.
Huh.
And it seemed like people were busy nonetheless. What were your feelings about your twiddling thumbs versus doing things ratio?
How about it, players? Did you feel some slack?
Yeah, I will say that, and this, I think the answer is going to be different for all of us, but I did have a great deal of thumb twiddling at first. Um, unfortunately, I'm a bit more of a passive player. One of the reasons why the defensive faction suited me, but I spent the first part of the game really trying to figure out which questions I needed to ask. Because I didn't have the right targets, and I didn't have information apparently that was helpful to any of the other factions. But I felt the same thing I saw the same thing that you saw, Fluid, when information started coming out. Just adding a little bit more context, the more information came out, the more stuff my brain had to grab onto, and then, oh, now I'm seeing my enemies clearer. We're sort of lifting some of that fog of war. I better understand the situation in the city and what I may need to do to accomplish my goals, right? That definitely, so the ratio flipped as the game went on. There was plenty of downtime as it took a while to work out some of the actions, especially on like day 3 and 4. But after the first couple of days, we all had more to talk about. That was my experience.
How about you, Gabe? Same deal? Downtime, twiddling?
Yeah, I thought that there was a pretty high ratio of times where we were sort of ready to progress on something, but sort of waiting for everything to filter through all the different conversations that were happening that may need something to be resolved before other steps could be taken. But again, I think all of that would be resolved instantly with open resolution and reading of orders. Because that's how like diplomacy board game does it. You have secret orders written, but reading them out loud together, and then because the game is so fluid, there's no specific rule for every given possible situation, then letting sort of everybody have a little bit of back and forth to weigh in on what makes sense with everyone's, say, day 1 orders would sort of kind of disperse the GMing role a little bit onto the whole party.
I'm not
think
really wrapping my head all the
of
way
it.
around that. I'm trying to figure out what you're talking about here. You're saying, because I know Fluid was like busy the whole, like he was running a marathon.
Yes.
And I can actually share, for those of you curious, what does this look like in practice? Here is the GangBusters Discord, and we've got several text chat channels, right? So there's the general rules and procedures, maps, and then each faction, like the Pinkertons and the Times Crier, got their own text channels. There may be some that I can't see also. And then there's these party lines where you can
every
chat
faction had their own channel.
Yeah, and then there's voice channels where most of the time we're all hanging out in this general channel, and this is where most of the thumb twiddling happened. So I noticed a lot of downtime as well. But the thing for me was, I'm with incredibly intelligent players that love the same stuff I do. The conversations that we were having during the thumb twiddling were like totally valuable to me too. I was getting to know Gabe for the first time. I thought it was fascinating. And I'm trying to remember some of the conversations we had, but like there were some between like Gabe and Night Danger where I just sat there and listened with my jaw open because it was so interesting what they were talking about. But anyway, you might be in the general group with everyone, and you might say, "Hey, Mr. O'Banion, you You want to step to party line 1 for a second, and then those 2 guys would disappear out of the general, voice channel. And so you could see when people moved different, you knew who was talking to who. You didn't always know what they were talking about. So in that way, the Discord kind of recreates playing diplomacy in your house and everyone going, "Hey, I'm going to meet me in the dining room," you know. And then if you look on the main section here, this is my channel, Times Crier. So here's my week 1 order. So I say week 1 : I have contracted 10 freelancers this week, and that was something Fluid can tell you I had to roll for to see how many I would get, because you just can't have as many as you want, and they each cost something. But I said, so I rolled and I got a 10. I was like, I've contracted 10 freelancers this week. I'm sending them out on the following stories. Number 1, get evidence that the mayor and police chief might be on O'Banion's payroll. Number 2, what's the deal with the dude up the flagpole at City Hall? Number 3, Johnny Kaspar's daughter is missing, but no missing persons report has been filed. Number 4, Eddie Collins Jr., son of Fire Kings, is also missing. See if there's a connection with 3. Number 5, hearing rumors of fixed boxing matches. Yeah, we haven't even talked about that one yet. Go hit the sports beat and see what you can find out. And then I told them I'm putting 2 on each, 1 a photographer. If they're comfortable with it, I'd like them armed with 38 revolvers. It's a dangerous city out there. I'm also advertising a tip line in this week's paper so that people can call in with any stories, tips, or information. So that was my week 1 orders. And then
should we all read our week 1 orders?
You can if you like, yeah.
Maybe that'd be fun.
Can I see them? I don't think I can see all of them.
Well, I mean,
but just to show you guys how Fluid was reacting, so we would give him a week's worth of orders, and then day by day he would tell us as those things started to come in fruition. So they didn't all pay off right off the bat, right? March 30, you hear that a body has been found near the Shenandoah Club. What do I know about Shenandoah? Has the body been ID'd? Male, female? I'll get a reporter on that. Peel off from their partner. Top priority. So we issued a whole week's worth of stuff, and then we start getting this back and forth with the DM. So does anyone else want to share their screen? And I'll. But I did want to just kind of pull the curtain back a bit and show people that are like trying to picture how does this work? You guys say you're like doing all this stuff. How does it actually work? For us, mostly it was either text back and forth with the DM, which I think, Fluid, you probably appreciated the text because you could keep it straight.
I could keep it straight. Yeah. Well, I couldn't keep it straight, but I could at least refer back to it.
Yeah. And then chat like face to face, like we're doing right now with the other faction leaders as we're trying to set up what our orders to the DM are going to be.
Yep.
I actually didn't have any interesting orders. As I said before, I was really passive, and I was still trying to understand what I needed to do to win that council vote. So I raised up 13 gangsters. I had to roll like you did, and I wanted to use those gangsters to sabotage the Teamsters. And I chose one of the wards where my support was shaky, and so I said, "Go." Sabotage their vehicles, stage a robbery, do stuff like that. I definitely wanted to and later I learned that it was Casper's men that I was going to be screwing with, and I was like, yeah, let's do that.
Hugh says, I was immersed in paranoia. The number of independent agents moving in the background gave even the resolution weights feel tense. Am I dead? Did they buy it?
I gotta say, Fluid. I know that GM made a really good point about not allowing us to change actions during the week, but I'm really grateful for that because as soon as, because I wasn't trying to fill every hour of every day, but as soon as information started coming out, I realized just how many other resources I had at my disposal, and so I was putting a new resource into play every day of the week, which I think by the end of the game, by the end of day 4, I'd finally shifted into second gear, and another week
fourth.
Well, I was still moving way slow, but maybe I skipped a couple of gears.
So going back to Gabe's idea, like what I just shared, what would that look like in the diplomacy model? Like would Fluid read off to everybody, here's what the Times Crier did, here are the 5 things they were working on? Or would he just start reading off the things that I found? Or like how do you keep fog of war with the quicker, easier method you're talking about?
I think you would just have everybody go around and read day one orders, right? Just go in a circle. What are our day one orders? And wherever they converge or diverge or whatever, then resolve that. And then
Yeah,
So
I think that
you can
actually would
cancel
work pretty
orders.
well.
What's that?
I think that would work really well. We'd have to specify that you'd write a week's worth of orders, but being more specific about exactly what's happening on each day.
It would change the way
why-
people write their orders, though. If they're trying to preserve fog of war, they might get more ambiguous. They might not just say, "Hey, I'm gonna go kill this guy's daughter." You know what I mean? Like, unless we're all just committed to, okay, we're not gonna metagame. Our characters are gonna play according to what they know, even though all of us know that everything is happening. I'm gonna walk into a betrayal because my character would. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I mean, that seems like how the game, based on my reading of the rules, would actually function.
Yeah, and
there's an enjoyment to that, right? There's like, I know I'm doomed. I know my guy is walking into a trap, and I just got to, maybe he can shoot his way out of it. Like, maybe.
And the rules have a lot of leeway for luck.
Yep.
Because it's going after hard-boiled fiction, right? You might get gunned down, but you might live, and your enemy might not know it, right? But also, what if you're doing it on a day-to-day written order? You may not have a choice but to walk into the trap, right? You said you were going here on this day.
Yeah,
the other guy said he was coming to rub you out. It's written, right?
Yeah, so that's the thing. The fog of war still exists, right? Because you don't know what other people's orders are until they're already submitted, and everybody's committed to them. You can't change them in a negative way, right?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for helping me understand that, because I knew you were onto something, but I knew I was being too thick to get it.
And I do think that is more like what the rules say.
And to clarify, I did not at all say it was boring when we weren't resolving orders. It was great fun hanging out and chatting. There were moments where, you wanted to move things forward and just couldn't, you were stuck in traffic a little bit.
Yeah.
Before we get too far down the road, there was a question earlier in the chat. Tag asks, one of the failings of endless fake medieval fantasy is that all semblance of realistic hierarchy has been watered away. Seems like a fresh setting really helped y'all explore that more.
I thought that was a really interesting point, right? Because one of the questions that the first questions you asked were like, why did you play? I didn't actually answer, but this is totally related, right? Because I think, so like right now, the Moonstein is going on, right? This Traveler Braunstein is going on. And I think an issue I have with that is that it's really hard for me to understand what the Traveler world is supposed to actually be. Because it's so broad, right? Even D&D is really broad, but in GangBusters, it's really clear what's happening, right? Everybody has this implicit understanding of how it works. Because we're all American. I mean, I guess Macho's not, but even if you're not, because of mafia movies and just the prevalence of Hollywood, most people at least have some kind of top level, like abstract understanding of different authorities and jurisdictions and how all of this works together, right? So that kind of that hierarchy that's baked into the system, everybody just has an implicit understanding of how it works. So you don't have to give nobody has to have too much background information. You can kind of just jump in and play. And as long as you've seen a couple of mob movies, you really understand how you're supposed to be interacting with each other and how you interact with the world like right away. So you can get started really, really quickly. Whereas with some of these other settings, because there's so much more pre-reading you have to do in order to understand like the literary background, to kind of understand what sort of character archetypes can exist and how they can interact with each other and how the world works more broadly. It could take a lot longer for those things to really get going. But with this like golden age of mafia setting, everybody could just get in and get right into action like immediately.
Yeah, well, there's the zeitgeist, right? Like there's the community understanding of the genre. But I feel like this one almost had an embarrassment of riches of things like Fluid really front loaded us with things that we could chase after to the point where I was almost paralyzed by options. at the beginning. Like I was like, what all is going on? What's important? Is the alderman thing the thing? And that felt like the biggest thing, and like we never got to that. How Fluid, how would you separate the differences? Maybe your philosophical difference in either just gangbusters or how you like to run battle Braunsteins. I'm gonna pick
Well,
on Jeffro here. The first battle Braunstein had the opposite experience. People just showed up and did not know what to do. We were all kind of like freaking out. I was in the Dornell spot. I was playing Steddington, which was the giants that everyone hated and wanted to kill. I didn't realize how powerful I was. It turns out hill giants are like catapults with no range issues. So like I could have really relaxed about it, but a lot of people just didn't know what to do, and it was kind of like, well, just play your role and we'll see how the things come together. This felt like something where everybody had a goal to start with, and maybe even to the point where even the convergences were a little bit pre-planned. They were more discovered than organically came about. So if Fluid, if you would talk a little bit about that and how you
sure.
feel about the different styles.
I would say I've had the same sort of experience you just described, where I came into Braunstein's as a player, and also what Dornell described of being paralyzed with indecision. Like, I don't know what information I don't know, so I don't know what the best choice is. I
Yeah.
don't even know how to ask the right question. And I've also felt like not that. Like in the 2021 Trollopolis Braunstein, when I was just a player with my character Fluid, which was done 1-to-1 time over the course of several weeks. A good chunk of that time, I was just traveling through the forest, walking to where I needed to be, right? It heated up. I was up in Alaska visiting friends, and we were literally standing in the rain in a cookout, an Alaskan cookout in the rain on the beach. And I was texting Jeffro how Fluid was gonna, lightning bolt, call lightning down on Elric.
Yes.
And it just happened. That's the time when that thing happened, right? and I did not feel like I didn't know what to do in that case. But in that case, I had come from Trollopolis, where I knew the background of Trollopolis. I knew the sorts of characters that were out there.
Yeah.
I had some feel for the setting after having played. And that was one of my goals with this, which was, we didn't have a game of Gangbuster game that's been running for 6 months before doing this Braunstein. So I
That's right.
wanted it to feel like we had one.
Okay.
And so I threw in, the kitchen sink of things that could be going on, that I wanted to have a lot of levers that people could grab onto, and the discovery and the thrill of discovery of which ones they do grab onto, because I knew it was too many for them to grab onto them all.
So you knew going into it, you gave them too much to do everything.
Right. And that's how the real world is too, right?
Yeah.
The real world has lots in it, and we almost interact with almost none of it. And yet we're still overwhelmed. That's life. So that was one of my goals, to have enough to do. And I guess that could be immersive in the sense, if people want to use that word. I don't think it is. I think it's like, you have things to do. You feel like you need to do things, or that you're vulnerable if you don't do things. In some ways, these Braunsteins have felt like whack-a-mole to a certain extent. Things pop up and you're whacking them down. And that's engaged, right?
I love it. Yeah.
And so I wanted to make sure there were things there to interact with, that people could choose to interact with or not to. And the not interacting is also a decision, right? And so anyway, that's kind of
I mean,
thoughts.
my hat's off for all the extra prep that you did. There's definitely so much there. I mean, I'm gonna make a really embarrassing admission. I was so overloaded by the information. When I first went through the information sheet, I didn't recognize that you gave me a list of aldermen. I saw the color coded, parties and which ward they were,
There were
Yeah.
too many aldermen.
I didn't realize
There's a
that
lot
those-
of aldermen.
I didn't realize that list also included people that my character should have been talking to. That's on me. But what you did was you made those levers interesting to more than one party. So they were they were, you know, I'm killing your metaphor here, but these levers are out there. They're out in the public, but they're mutually exclusive, right? Only one person's going to win this upcoming council vote. You know, only one gangster is going to control the majority of the bootlegging operation and the running the numbers games and fixing fights and all that, right? And that's what I was trying to get at earlier when I was asking you about putting those little subplots together. Just having just those few things that we all had to fight over made it really enjoyable and just gave us what we needed to be engaged. I don't really get the question about immersion. I didn't feel immersion. I didn't feel immersion much in the sense of what's the word for that? Diegesis or diegetic action where you are thinking and behaving as the character would behave. The only time I felt that was when I was speaking to Tom Lombardo, and I had to tell him in my best Irish brogue that there was no way I was going to work for the Capones.
Yeah.
Right on, man.
Now here's a question for you, Dornall. When you sent your hitman after Johnny Casper, I ran the hit with Johnny Casper. Now, my other option as a referee would have been to draw you in and have you run the hitman against Johnny Casper. I chose not to do that because I felt like there should be a fog of war where you don't know how it turned out necessarily. On the other hand, it could have been just as fun for you to run that guy, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I had mixed feelings about that decision.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's honestly a coin flip because both things are satisfying in a different way, and I would have been satisfied in one of those ways either way. But I think I prefer the way that you did it because for me, mastery of the system and I don't think it would have been as interesting to me to defeat Johnny Caspar in GangBusters, the fist fight or shooting game, right? I found it much more satisfying as a player, and if you're the type, it was much more immersive to me just be Leo O'Banion sitting at home, enjoying a whiskey, wondering, gosh, if this doesn't happen, I'm in a lot of trouble right now.
Just waiting on the other shoe to drop.
And having to wait till the next day to find out whether and I mean this is a low percentage play, right? Waiting to find out the next day if it had succeeded. That suspense was great, and I definitely would have preferred it that way.
It could have gone either way. The rub out. There are times where Casper could have really been killed, just rolled poorly, and then other times when he played the rules well and got in a situation where he actually could overcome the guy. And so it was really uncertain. But anyway, that was just one thing I was wondered about.
Yeah, I think if if you had your ideal situation where you had multiple refs and everything like that, then yeah, just let the players duke it out. Walk away, tell me how it goes.
Yeah, because I think the players just duking it out with the guys they have is more true to the game in one sense. Because like right at the beginning of the rules, it's really a cops and robbers skirmish game, which might sometimes have a referee if he felt like it. They kind of describe it that way, and so it doesn't do a lot of effort in the rules describing how to come up with a scenario to actually play the cops and robbers. That's if there's one thing that's I think a downside in the rules, that's it. So how would you come up with the scenarios if there was no referee? I guess somebody would come up with one, and you'd put the, it literally comes with little chits of gangsters and cars and stuff you can put on maps, like a chit-based game.
I actually have an idea about that, and I've been thinking about this for a while now. Is one of the things that we didn't really do much of was the cops and robbers stuff, which was missing from the Braunstein was money.
Yeah.
I knew that I had 3 locations that were generating money for me. They were the core of my businesses, but
Yeah, if we
you know,
had finished out the week, I would have been rolling to see how much each of the businesses had made.
and even if you had, those numbers don't mean anything, because that was the one
Right.
thing missing that you would have gotten in an ongoing game, which is
For
what's
sure.
gonna. None of the gangs had incentive to, for example, point at a spot on the map and say, "Fluid, I'm gonna go rob the bank in that neighborhood,"
Yeah,
right?
because I need some money.
Right. And
Right.
so,
Yeah.
so
That's a good point.
what we weren't going to get, we were never going to get organically the Albanian mob trying to knock over a liquor store and the cops happening to be investigating something in the area and they get called on it, right? And so then you bring
Right.
in the cop player and the mob player and you play that out. That wasn't going to happen organically. Everything that was going to happen was going to be centered around the sort of key locations that you put on all of our sheets. And so I think that's something that you would get out of a regular
Ongoing
GangBusters game.
game.
Yeah.
Especially,
Most of us
especially
didn't get to see that combat, but I read about it in the session report, and it sounded like it was really cinematic and fun and awesome.
Mhm.
Can somebody either in the chat or in the private chat put in the link to Fluid's? I'm an idiot. I should have this in the. Jeffro would light me up for not already having it in the description. As soon as we're done here and we're not live, I will put that in the description for the video.
Which one do you want? Do you want the one from the fight, right?
Yeah, the one with the fight.
All right.
And while he's doing that, while he's pulling that up, I do want to just show you guys an example of the kind of stuff I was getting to do in the general channel. Extra, mayor calls on extra snowplows to dig us out. Thanks, O'Banion, for helping fund the effort. Bookies taking bets on how long City Hall pole sitter can hold out up there. FBI and Lakefront PD join up to raid at Monk's apartments outside city jurisdiction. 18th Ward protesting. The body in the alley is identified as Rug Daniels. Is the mob fixing boxing matches? Bizarre losses have people's heads scratching. So that was a ton of fun, and people got little glimpses of stuff that was going on outside of their purview that they had nothing to do with. But they also got those little flashes of recognition where I was like, "Oh yeah, that was me. I did that."
I've got the
Yeah.
blog post here.
And I put in the private chat, I put a link to it.
Okay.
The big rub out.
The big rub out.
I'll
throw it in
the other interesting thing, as the referee, I also was in the dark. There's fog of war for the referee too, because I had no idea what everybody was saying to one another or how the information I was imparting was being taken. So that was the thing. As hearing people's descriptions is interesting to me, because I didn't get a sense of what was going on, really.
So you've shared some of your GM goals. For people watching this that are worried, oh man, this sounds so complicated. This sounds so complex. I don't know if I could ever run something like that. What would you say?
I would say GangBusters is the game for you. It's actually a relatively simple game. It's not a complex set of rules. It doesn't even have random damage. The damage is set for each weapon.
Okay.
And always does the same amount. That simplifies things. If you want to get fancy, it does have a hit location table where you might do like a little bit less damage if you roll wrong on the hit location table. But it's a very simple system, but it has some surprising complexities, like not complex in actually execution, but as gameplay. And particularly, I would say that comes in with the melee rules, where you're each character is choosing an action, and then you kind of are cross-referencing sort of the actions with each other and to see how it comes out. And the other thing to know is that, like, if you look at what's shown on the screen now, if you're in a fist fight, all gunfighting is at a -40. So as soon as you enter into a fist fight with another character who's armed, they're at a it's still going to suck if you get shot, but they have a significant disadvantage in shooting you from that point on. And that played heavily into the fight that happened. And it's also a tactic in the game. Like, if the guy across the room has a gun, you might jump out the window or you might charge him, because that might be a good tactic in this game.
Charge a gun back off of a knife.
Yeah, really, because the knives and stuff in melee will mess you up pretty good.
How often did the rules come up in the Braunstein?
Well, there's I've already forgotten what the rule is. There's a attribute, which is what's it called? Presence and observation. Two different. And observation, when I would use observation rolls for when people gave me orders for their minions on whether or not they were gonna, like, the FBI might be staking out, the speakeasies to see who's coming and going. And I'd roll an observation roll to see if they saw anybody, if there was somebody to see. Similarly, if there was sent to do a negotiation with somebody who was an NPC, I'd use the presence rolls. The presence are basically, you can intimidate someone, or maybe it's not just intimidation, but maybe you're good looking or whatever, or have good verbal skills. You're able to convince people to be on your sides. You have presence. So those are two big ones that I rolled on a fair amount.
Does it have like a reaction table mechanic?
Yes. Yeah. And the reaction table, let me find it. I might have put it on. Did I put it in that one? I might not have.
I don't think so.
Yeah. It's on the back of the rules. But the reaction roll is modified by presence.
Okay.
And whether someone has a weapon or has made a threat, that kind of thing. And so I did make those sort of rolls as well. That's where the presence came in.
The point I'm trying to get at is, like, it seems like you need to know the rules, but a lot of it is the social game. And, well, maybe for the DM, you're using them a lot more, but maybe Gabe and Trash can weigh in. How much of the rules did you guys need to know to play this?
For me, the rules that actually came into play were the stats of any given character, so that I knew what they were good at, so that I could send them on the various tasks that I wanted them to do and be confident that they might do it. So it was basically, the rules that I really interacted with were pretty much just, okay, what do each of these stats for my underlings mean comparatively, and then based on those, which of the various tasks that they need to do am I going to send each given little untouchable out on.
Did you roll those characters up?
No, they were all set up. I mean, you could not have a better set up Braunstein than this. Like, Fluid just set this up to make it a joy to just jump in and play from the start.
100%.
And a lot of
Brilliant.
those stats were straight from part 12, the appendices, where they have a lot of generic archetypes, like gangster enforcer, gangster driver. Some of them I rolled randomly, but a lot of them I just took straight off the list. This guy's a thug. Okay. He's a gangster enforcer. Or this guy's a prohibition agent. Here's his stats. Or in the case of Elliot Ness, they have all the stats of all of the untouchables in here.
Okay.
I just copied
So
them down.
probably
for
my
Elliot
underlings are
Ness.
people that if I were not, just a cultural ignoramus would have recognized.
They're all real people, I believe.
Oh, I thought they were all made up too.
Gabe, let me just throw this out there. I don't think anyone would call you a cultural ignoramus, Gabe. Not out of the conversations I've had. So there's one movie you didn't see.
A cultural ignoramus. Weren't you the one that spent half of our downtime talking music theory with Night Danger?
Yeah.
No, I think that was someone else.
Darn.
No, that's probably Jared. Jared's
Yeah.
the composer.
I was listening to that conversation very interested, but I was not the one having it.
I still need to talk to Gabe about Gene Wolfe, but Trash, I wanted you to weigh in as well. How did you feel rules wise? Did you know the rules or not? Did you feel hindered, or did you feel free to just try what you wanted and trust the DM to work it out?
I read through the rules. I sort of skimmed them. I only really paid close attention to combat, which ended up not coming up for me very often. But I felt free, I think, because the game is so straightforward. It's so simple and so elegant and relatively intuitive. The only thing I really paid much attention to was like presence and for reaction rolls. And I was trying to, when I was like issuing orders to my various underlings, I was also trying to pay attention to reactions and making them better by like giving them extra money or extra booze rations or whatever, which ended up not really coming up because we didn't even play through one full turn. But the rules are so straightforward. I really think you don't actually need to understand them at all in order to be a player. You could really just jump straight in without knowing them, and it would be totally fine.
Yeah, and when a combat came up, you flip to the combat section and figure it out. These are simple rules, and they work pretty well.
Right on. So because that's not the same strategy that everyone has had, right? Like Bob Stevens famously, when he ran his BattleBraunstein, he just told his players, you've got the monster manual, pick a faction. And so they did the research, they picked out what their faction was, they rolled to see how many they had for number encountered, and then that was their forces. And so it was like a no prep DM type thing, right?
Yeah. And the monster manual though has that information pretty available in there, right?
Yeah. But Jeffro's like, roll up your own traveler character. Let me know what they've got, how much money they have, what they're leaving in their stateroom, and what they're taking with them. And so just interesting, different approaches. I guess, and maybe we can look towards wrapping with this, unless we hit on another topic. What would you guys say, both GM and players? What were your takeaways? How was this different than other BattleBraunstein experiences you've had? What do you think we learned specifically from this GangBusterstein? Who's going to go first?
Well, I'm at the top, so
right on.
Why not? I think what I take away from it is that the written orders, a week's worth of written orders, is the best way to run a Braunstein, period. Like, I'm just going to implement that in all my Braunsteins from now on. Like, the overarching structure of this game is perfect for that. Whether it's, a gangland adventure or not. Like, I'm just going to use hey, write your orders for the week down and then we'll resolve them from here on out. It's brilliant.
Cool.
I want to say my big takeaway from this came from my interactions with the chief of police and reinforced by the BattleBraunstein I did in Dubseron the following week, where I got to play the mayor of a town. Cops and Robbers is probably the best or the most necessary play dynamic in this kind of game. Having differences in authority and power amongst the players and putting the role of the law in the hands of one of the players automatically generates an interesting dynamic, and it gives the players, we all had our incentives to keep secrets, make secrets, share secrets, spread misinformation, and so on. And as I said earlier, the inclusion of the press made it even better.
Yeah.
I think that was my biggest takeaway, was the factions set up by this game are perfect for it. And I was also grateful for Fluid's prep, and it was great to see BattleBraunstein done more as like a traditional LARP, where you're handed your faction with your goals and abilities and secrets at the start of the game. That was really great. This sort of this scenario could easily be typed up, packaged up, and run at your local gaming convention.
I mean, aside from adding combat stats, it almost has the feel of one of those how to host a murder, right? Like everyone's got something that they don't want the others to know. Everyone's got something that they're trying to figure out. And you get Tommy guns. So all right,
Absolutely.
we'll jump to Trash, and then we'll let Fluid have the last word since he set it up. Trash, what's your big takeaway from this this experience?
I think so. Since this was my first real second Braunstein, the big lesson that I took from it is get involved in the game as early as you can. Don't hesitate. Passivity will lose you the game, like almost guaranteed. Even if it's a smart strategy, like say IRL, if you're in charge of a mob, you might want to play it like really passive and reactive to put yourself in the best position possible. But when you've got 4 hours to play this one scenario, that's just going to reduce the amount of stuff that you can actually do. You should try getting involved, like show up with at least a basic plan, try to implement it immediately, and like take every opportunity that comes up to do something like kind of extreme, right? Like I really should have just gone for hitting one of these like number rackets or both of them pretty quickly, pretty early. Instead, I decided to play it cool and see like, well, maybe I can make an alliance, maybe not. And then by the time it finally seemed like maybe that was happening, the game was just over. So, and that was difficult for me too, because I was the underdog. Like I was kind of in a really tough position. Not really like a natural ally to anybody, and definitely not an ally of like the cops or, anything. And presumably with not a ton of resources financially. So I should have just immediately tried to enact some kind of plan that involved hitting another player like hard and quickly, and then just moved from there. So passivity will lose you the game. So just get involved quickly.
Right on. Look for those moments where you can make it about yourself. Force others to react to what you've done. For me, there was a few things that I took away from this one. I've loved everyone that I've taken part in, so I can't really. But I do like the approach that Fluid had of saying, I'm going to create the characters, I'm going to give you the stats, I'm going to hand you a bunch right up front and let you pick what you want to do. But it like Gabe was saying, it was like a seamless entry into the game and into the game world. I also agree with Dornell that having a newspaper faction, having a reporter, adds a new dimension. That well, I mean, we had that. Well, I say we. I wasn't around back then, but the Trilopulus News Network, right back in the
that was Jeff Robate writing the headlines. So he was the
and
GM and the reporter.
just the fact that so like years ago I was on the deacon board in our church, and I remember, like, whenever they're like asking, they're doing Robert's rules, and they're like, do I have a motion, do I have a second, do I have a support? And like, I was a fresh brand new deacon, and the first time that I said support, they're like, hey, you got in the minutes, like they're all joshing me, like, oh, you got in the meeting minutes. But like, that's kind of what it's like when you have a newspaper. Like, part of you just wants that gratification of knowing that the thing you did made the headlines that day, and you're like, ah, ha, 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 I did that. That was hilarious. So those are my takeaways. Like, not just having the good guys and the bad guys, but just having someone that's paying attention and representing the public does add an extra dimension. So Fluid.
I guess there's a couple things. I think the way I structured it, where I was essentially running the fog of war between each faction, was kind of inefficient, and could have gone faster. And I think, like, Gabe's suggestion is well worth trying, and may actually be more in the spirit of the game. The other thing I think is that I think it worked pretty well nonetheless, and maybe even had some features that GangBusters, without that approach, wouldn't have. But my next thing I want to try is just people rolling up first level characters of various classes, and trying it more like Gabe on a weekly approach, where there's a regular session where you're starting low. If you're a criminal, you probably are going to be, I'm just going to rob the liquor store. I just need some bucks, right? And work your way up, because there are rules in there for criminals of gaining levels, getting opportunities to join bigger gangs and organizations. There are rules for low level, starting as a beat cop and working your way up in rank. Those are still things left to try in the game. So there's still plenty of more game left to do. But overall, I thought it worked pretty well. Some things could have gone smoother. I personally was surprised that there were so few combats. But I was actually kind of pleased, because that meant that people were, interacting more,
Yeah.
And one of my, I guess, criticisms of some other Braunsteins is that there has been like a big push to go straight into knifing each other in the back.
Well, that was our experience with the first Travelerstein, right? You and me.
Right, when you don't know even what your incentive to do so is, right?
I was just scared because I got caught stealing.
Yeah, you had good incentive, right? Yeah, and so, but there were still things for people to do. They were interacting with one another, and so that was gratifying. So, but I do think that the idea of like leaping in quickly and coming up with a plan that you're trying to instigate makes a lot of sense.
The other thing that stood out to me is very memorable is, and this may be something that people that have only played D&D might have a hard time with. Like, why would I want to play a gang member? Why would I want to be a bad guy? I want to be the hero, right? And by having a specific time in history and leaning into maybe some of the uncomfortable race relations that were going on in the game, like, I would make the sense in defensive immersion, that getting to try on another's perspective and worry about the things that they worry about, it gives you a more well-rounded view. if you're just like, well, the cops are the good guys and the robbers are the bad guys, why would I ever want to play a robber? But it's like, oh, well, no, you're actually a mob boss and you're sitting on a throne of swords. And at any moment, it could all come toppling down. And the only thing you can do is keep this police officer in your pocket. You know, like just that change in perspective. I don't know. I think it's fun to be able to play with that in a place where it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
And
and I think that ethnic rivalries in the game are a huge part of it. They didn't put those all on the map for no reason.
yeah,
And you mentioned the movie Untouchables. There's a famous scene in the movie Untouchables that's within the police between an Irish cop and an Italian cop.
yep.
They don't like each other just based on who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the ethnic things aren't just, skin color based, or they're ethnic conflicts. There's and in the past, in the 20s, there was a lot of it. But the other thing is, in the 20s, the gangsters weren't necessarily the bad guys. There was a lot of people that really did want to take a drink, and the gangsters enabling that. And so, the prohibition agents, axing the kegs of beer and dumping them down the sewer, weren't necessarily the good guys, because why shouldn't someone be able to drink a beer? Those lines are crossed in that era.
Yeah.
And so I think that helps people be willing to play the criminal, because definitely in other games, playing the bad guy, people have balked at a lot, in my experience.
I mean, there's a huge difference, and part of it is because of the connection we have with that very real history, is that it's not necessarily cool to play an evil wizard or an evil orc assassin. But gangsters are freaking cool.
Yeah, and
They're
and,
I mean, Scarface is on the wall of half of America's dorm rooms for a reason.
Yeah, say hello to my little friend.
Right?
Yeah,
Gangsters are freaking cool.
And also, I'm going to say this right up front. I think I've probably played the most mundane Braunstein of all time. At least since the original Braunstein or Brownstones, those early ones. Because there's no fantastic elements except perhaps the luck rule.
And yet it's
game.
still pulpy as all get out.
For sure. But it's mundane. Like,
It's romanticized. That's why.
Yeah, it is romanticized. I mean, you could kidnap Lindbergh's baby, but it's possible. You might have a criminal character decide to become a kidnapping ring, and be kind of awful.
As Select Harry says, and being able to explore the other through something like an RPG. Also, for me, just you having a pole sitter, I went looking for pictures to put in the newspaper, and I realized that was like their planking or whatever. Like that was a big fad in the 20s. Was people I didn't know that, so I'm learning stuff, yo. You're edutaining me. How dare you?
Yeah, but yeah, I do think the observation that the GangBusters probably has the easiest entry of most compared to other role-playing games is true. We all know how the U.S. is organized. We all know what the cops' powers are, more or less, and what the gangsters kind of are up to, more or less.
Right on.
So that it makes it easier.
Planet Tobor TV says, these style of games are fascinating to me. Listening to y'all and reading about them, I have yet to try one. Well, I got good news for you, Planet Tobor. This is not the last BattleBraunstein that's going to be run this year. In fact, there's somebody in this very room getting ready to plan another one. And I think, Gabe, did you say that you were looking to run one soon as well with the?
Yeah, I'm hoping to run a sort of GangBusters adjacent one using Call of Cthulhu. So like GangBusters, but with a couple of magical factions in there as well. I'm gonna try
That's great.
and
Cops,
time it.
robbers, reporters, and cultists.
Yeah, that's
Cult is the
exactly
new
it.
gang, man.
I'm gonna try and make it
Oh.
an election, and have it
Ooh,
actually
spicy.
tie up with the like parallel the actual election.
Oh, nice.
That's
So
clever. I like
I'm
that.
gonna make
Don't
it,
blame me. I voted for
October,
Jan
November.
Sothoth.
Yeah.
And Dornell, I don't know if your dance card's full yet, but you've got a Cyberpunk one planned.
Oh yeah, we're gonna do. I was so glad that Fluid got this Gangbusters thing out because I've been wanting to do a gang related Cyberpunk game, and it's not going to be. It was originally going to be like a conventional game where everybody's in a gang. No, we're going to do full on Braunstein. Cyberpunk 2020 is a really character centered system, but the character classes, like any good role playing game, can be factions in and of themselves. So we're going to have rival corporations, rival gangs, rival media corporations. For anybody who might want to play a reporter, for example.
It's fun, guys. I'm telling you.
Yeah. The dates on that are forthcoming. You can catch me on Twitter at DornellGG, and I'll be looking for players in the next couple of weeks.
Awesome.
Right on.
I'm in.
Yes.
Yeah, I've been looking into since this Gangbusters game into Twilight 2000 by Game Design Workshop for a Braunstein. I think that would be an incredibly cool system to use for it, with a bunch of natural factions, right? Like you have someone playing the invading Red Army and someone playing the remnants of the U.S. military. Multiple people have their own little like militias, and everybody's kind of feuding in multiple directions.
Love it. Just have them fight over the missile silos in the mountains like Red Dawn.
Immortan Joe and the War Boys.
There was a Twilight 2K Braunstein not so long ago. I didn't play in it. I couldn't play in it because I was busy writing this one. but you might check it out. I'm trying to. It was
it was JD Swavage, right?
Yeah, that's the guy. He did it. So you might talk with him and see his experience. He might have some advice or things that worked or didn't work.
I did not even know about that.
It's you got it. I was just typing that in, Dornell.
Yeah, my username DornellGG. GG's for Geek Gab, and now that you made me say this, I'm gonna plug it. Me and Daddy Warpig, we do a show on YouTube every Monday night. We talk about games and books and movies and stuff like that. I'm not terribly active on X or Twitter, but I'll be looking for players.
I've had an idea bouncing around in my head, and I get these sometimes, and sometimes I don't follow through, and sometimes I do. But I think I'm gonna get stink eye for bringing him up probably. But Questing Beast has a newsletter called The Gladysant, where he just covers OSR topics for the week, and I've been wondering if it's time for a BroSR version of that, where I would just put together a list of the Braunsteins that are going on, the ongoing BroSR campaigns, maybe some of the drama, maybe some stuff where if you want to put together a BattleBraunstein and you want to call for players, something like that. I don't know if I would do that as like a blog type deal or a Substack, or maybe just do little like news episodes or something. But just answering Tobor's need to experience this stuff as he's been paying attention to it. I think there could be, there might be an audience for that, for people to just want to keep up with what the bros are doing and use these techniques for yourselves instead of just watching what they're doing. All that being said, we're 2 minutes to the hour. Fluid, was it worth it? Did you get what you wanted out of this? And
I think I did. I kind of wished I had gotten through a full week, but for a first try where I threw everything into it that I possibly could, I thought it went pretty well, and I'm quite happy with how it turned out. And it gave me lots of insight for other things to try in the future. So what more could you want?
Right on, man. Well, it was super fun to take part. I am beyond fortunate to know you guys and be able to do the fun things you're doing. Thank you so much for taking this time and pulling back the curtain and showing my audience the kind of crazy fun we have. And this is not something you need to be inducted into any order to do. These are not secrets. You can do this for yourself. You can run your own BattleBraunsteins. Do it. Let me know about it. I'll bring you on the channel and we can do something like this for your BattleBraunstein. Thank you guys so much. And everyone have a great night. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.